offer me, please, some insights into the interview process and also the writing transposing process.
For instance, let's say I don't know how to divide Boston, but I'm going to talk like New York. Let's say you're in the Lower East Side near Nuyorican Poets Cafe. That will have one mayor. Then you go to the West Village. That's another mayor. Then you go to Chelsea. That becomes another mayor. That helps with the racial. That's the racial divide. To keep money coming into those cities, one of the things that people were doing were stopping Black people, say, for hitting up with, or you're driving too fast. So it's like, okay, I'm going to give you a fine for $100. Then I don't have it. Then tomorrow it goes to 200, 300. So they needed money to come into these little enclaves, and not to mention the racial violence that was also happening, during that particular time. Before Michael got shot in 2013, there were roughly 750 racially themed, as it were, crimes. And within the history of Ferguson, within that area, there have never been any Black policemen. So when Michael got shot, St. Louis Rep Steve Wolf was running it at the time, said to me, and Seth Gordon, they were there at the time, and they said, we would like to use theater as a means to create conversation. Would you be willing to come down and do a piece about this? And so we talked about it, and I said, what I want to do is not look so much at the actual shooting itself, because that's also very complicated, but what I'm going to use this as a there's a word that I'm looking for. I want to know what race meant during that particular time, a catalyst for race. What does race mean? How does this shooting affect you? What about the racist within you? How does this, or is there a racist within you? Because I do believe we all have one. What does this kick up for you on a day-to-day basis? What does this mean to your life? So when I went down, I didn't ask about who did what where. What does this shooting mean to you in because I was down in 2014, 2015. What does it mean to you? And that's the way we approached it.
And how I'm really interested in your process. How did you know then was there a point where you knew that you actually had to start crafting the piece for the theater from the interview? Did it sort of subtly evolve?
I made it very clear that the interviews are not verbatim, because that's what Anna does, and she does it brilliantly. I wanted this when I sat down with people, I let them know that I said, and particularly I spoke with Michael Brown Sr. as well. I spoke to many people, that I said, I don't feel comfortable playing you. I said, but this does affect me and the rest of the world. And the thing that I use is healthy sense of boundary. And I said, so what this is going to be is composite. These are going to be, these are composite figures. And so that's what I kept that within my mind's eye. And then when Neil Keller and I sat down, because I wanted him to direct it, we talked about the arc of the piece, what we felt to be the strongest stories, like beginning and ending with Louisa, because Louisa coming up, around the time doing like the 50s to 60s, again, because we felt that history, in fact, is repeating itself. And her coming full circle, or did she come full circle and thus end the piece the way she did? Because these times does remind people that this kind of upheaval is very similar to that time.
How do you benefit from those, for me, transformational experiences? Are you having the same kind of benefit, a parallel kind of benefit, by honoring specifically the Black male voice that does not get the opportunity to be sensitive and express the more complicated thoughts and feelings?
I mean, it's not as, what I hope, because I'm not a politician or a therapist, but I do hope that it does. I hope it adds to a collective. That's what have I delineated these characters fully? Even if we don't like them, do we understand them? Do we have an empathy? I mean, we may not have a sympathy, but do we have an empathy? Have I done my job? That's where I'm coming from with that. And hopefully within that, that's what I think of, really. And I hope I have reached someone that way. And if it's the kind of thing, whether someone wants to embrace it, because again, this is where the individuation comes in. If I've done my job and if that person wants to receive that information and take that, or no, whatever works on that level, that's great. But my whole thing, Timothy, is beginning, middle, and story conflict resolution. I'm interested in the craft more so. It's not that I'm indifferent to how the way people feel, because obviously you want them, I want them to be fully there and cognizant. And that my job is to make it such, via the theater, to do that work. But the other stuff, again, you have to watch that, because I've had people say, my kid went out and did, if your child went out and did something great, I hope I added to that. But if I didn't add to that, that means that you're a great parent and you created this world for them where they're open. If your child goes out and kills, I hope, I didn't add to that, but also that means that your child was screwed up before they came into the theater, so that kind of thing. It really becomes, you have to watch your ass with that stuff.
Just answer my next question. Like, does the actor ever say, if the writer had only, done A and B, I could have been better at that? Or, but it sounds like you just trust the
because I'm not somebody who, I'm somebody who actually, I don't care whether I wrote it or not, I stick to my text. The only time I don't stick to my text, like, we did it like with Forever, because that was almost like a piece of music in certain ways. And so so there were certain words maybe I would riff on, but not too much. We won't stay close to the text. Because you could do that more so with jazz. You can't do that with rock and roll, really.
Right.
And I consider Forever more of a rock and roll piece.
How would you describe Until the Flood?
I don't know. There's a musicality to it, but I'm not quite sure what music is connected to it. I know the characters. I could look at someone like Hassan, obviously. He's influenced by hip hop. And then I can look at, say, someone like Louisa, who's influenced by, by gospel. I can look at someone like Doug Ray, where I'm not quite sure what music he has. I see him as someone who's actually atonal. Different characters have different musicality within this piece.
Have no formal training as a director. My thing was always about doing whatever I can, mostly intuitively, but directly as well, to get, it's not so much what I'm getting off the page, which is very important, but I want to know what the writer was thinking and feeling when they were actually writing it. Like, that's what I want to, and I try to, on an intuitive and feeling level, source from there.
Right. No. Well, also a lot of times it's like, there's a word that I tend to use when I was talking to some of these people, because I sat down with people and I said, I'm not playing you. I don't feel comfortable playing you, but I'll use something you said because I really want to get a sense of the terrain, what this shooting means to you. Because this, I think, let's see if this helps you, because subtext is a word that I use. There's a lot, in terms of like Darren Wilson and in terms of Michael Brown, and this will help, I think. They're the flip side of the same coin. By that, what I mean is that they were both born to single mothers. They both came from basically fatherless homes. I'll give you Darren Wilson first. Darren Wilson was born May 13th, 1986. His mother was a grifter. His mother went from place to place to place to place. And it's like, what happened was, like, she'd befriend people. And they'd say, I'm going on vacation. Oh my God, I'll watch your house for you. Oh, fine. And what she would do is get into their computers and steal their business. And here's this child going from, and by the time she was 34, she was married 3 times. She also did it. But the last husband, this is when she died, quote unquote, mysteriously. The last husband, and this was like around in Texas, I believe, said, look, your mother's dead. I've got a child here that I have to raise. You're almost 18, 19 years old. It's time for you to go. Michael Brown was born May 20th, 1996. Michael Brown Sr. had him when he was like 19, 20. Leslie McFadden was about 16, 17. Michael Brown Sr.'s mother had him when she was like 16 or 17. So you've got this generational abuse, generational. Leslie McFadden, I didn't want to interview her because at that particular time, Hillary Clinton was all over her. You know, Oprah was all over her. She had her book, Tell the Truth and Shame the Devil and all of this. And she, you know, and there was a lot of stuff that was going on. It's like she was actually, to use a horrible term, she was like kind of a media whore at the time, you know, and I really didn't want any, you know, parts of that. And again, also, and I didn't want to reach out to, no one knew where Darren Wilson was. And it's just like, again, I'm not playing them. So I didn't want to, you know, but I was subtextually, I was thinking, okay, when I sat down with Michael Brown Sr., he married the second wife. He was not married legally to Leslie McFadden. And so the second wife, he married her and had a new family. By this time, Michael was 19, i.e. Darren Wilson, you know, 10 years ago, was like 18, 19. So I'm thinking there must have been a part of Michael that thought, you didn't marry my mother, but you married this woman. You got kids with this woman. I go to visit my grandmother at the housing projects, you know, because she raised me. You didn't raise me. When you were with my mother, you guys are fighting, going from place to place. I'm thinking in both cases, even though I'm not playing either one of them, that they both felt abandoned. Certainly you've got the issue of race, but then again, this is where, again, we're two hurt men, both one black, one white, but two hurt boys, inner boys. And definitely in Michael's case, because Darren is 10 years older, but the inner boy, and then you've got the actual boy / young man, they collided. And here are these two people who are, I'm going to be the bigger man. Two hurt, angry people met. And also, again, ironically enough, when I was down there at one point, Leslie McFadden, Michael's mother, and Michael Brown Sr.'s mother, the grandmother, they were fighting because grandma was selling Michael Brown merchandise and not giving Leslie any money. This gives you insight as to how these boys were raised. And the fact that Darren Wilson, I'm sure there was a part of him that went, I come from this unstable woman. To become a cop, to become part of militia, the way a lot of people, when they join the army, when they join the Navy, it's a sense of quote unquote order. They're looking for regimented guidance, right? Because there is no affection, there is no love. So, you know, how many times have people said, I've made the Army my family, I've made the Navy my family? People join those things because they don't have a biological family a lot of the time. And it gives them a sense of order. It's like they may not be, you know, they may not be conventionally educated, or they feel that they, you know, the conventional education system, they don't have that kind of smart, as it were. So we'll join this. I can, you know, if I'm in there, I'll build a house. I can, you know, I'll get enough money where I can, you know, I can get a GI Bill or whatever. You know what I mean? It's like I get my, you know, so they learn a trade that becomes family. So you're talking about two hurt people, and they both are roughly the same size. We're talking about huge men, 6'3", 6'4". And in terms of the actual shooting, no one knows exactly what happened. Now, some people said Michael reached in first. Other people said, no, he didn't. Other people said, you better change your testimony. But the thing is, when you have that kind of job, and I'm not blaming anybody, when you have that kind of job in militia, your last response is violence. It's supposed to be. It's like, you know, even if you have to drag the car and all of this kind of stuff, you know, I mean, your last impulse should be to have to shoot someone. So who's to say what was going on within his mind's eye? You know, did Michael reach for the gun? Could he have turned on the accelerator and just gone really super fast, and maybe he would have dropped off? Who's to say? But the fact that he felt that he had to do that, you know, what does it mean to be that angry, to be that hurt and have a gun? And also some people said, well, you know, Michael was getting ready to graduate, you know, why would he resort to that. It's like, again, people go to what's familiar. For him to steal is familiar. For him to reach for violence is familiar. For him to leave what he knows, even though it's for the betterment, is familiar, because there's a part that's afraid. There's a part that's also self-loathing because of what's happened. Do I deserve to do better?
Thank you.
Does that help? Does it, what I just said, does it?
Well, yeah, it helps me enormously. It's much more than I ever could have anticipated. It's all bonus in terms of advice for moving into the flood. Thank you. And you're healing me, my sister. The way you articulated that revealed to me a new level of my understanding of the order that I chose in the theater. And how there's a real reckoning happening now with the racial reckoning, having a micro one within me as I'm dealing it with all these folks out here. And that I know I'm bringing right to this production, but you've really given me great food.
But even, and one more thing, even like with Doug Ray, look at Doug Ray's background. I'm not glorifying, I mean, you know, when he talks about being born from two drunks, here is somebody who sits at a table who is reading, who's trying to better themselves, right? And they're in West Virginia and stuff. I mean, we get, unfortunately, toward the end, we see the poison, you know? But again, he's a composite figure. I didn't actually meet somebody like that. There was a guy who was just shooting me shade when I was interviewing certain people and talking to him, you know, and I just kind of made him up. And then I asked a little bit about him, and then a history, just watching him, a history came to me. You know, I don't know whether he's from West Virginia or not. I don't know anything about him. But again, when you look at a hurt boy who becomes an angry man, and where his knowledge is no longer just knowledge, it becomes a form of weaponry. It's like, I am going to, you know, when people say, I'll show you, it's like, when, you know, when people use that example, when they say that, use that expression, I'll show you, look, you ain't showing me nothing. I don't care what happens to you. But the fact that someone makes you that important to give them the impetus to go on, they have, quote unquote, something to prove to themselves. That the person in front of them who you're using, they don't give a shit what happens to you. But the fact that you have nothing and you're going to focus in on something like that to feed you, it usually goes into anger mode. Yeah, you may make something of yourself, you may build something of yourself, but you've also built a wall that's also impenetrable. So on the one hand, you're feeding yourself. On the other hand, you're also blocking yourself. So with the Doug Ray character, who used, you know, who left there and you know, went to school and did all of that kind of stuff. God bless him for getting out of that situation.
Yeah.
But he carried the anger with him. You know, this is where the anger becomes toxic. So there you go.
Thank you, my dear.